Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily and marketing podcast. Each week, John Kasman interviews multifamily and marketing experts to teach you how to find the best places to invest, attract investors, and grow your portfolio. You are listening to Target Market Insights with your host, John Kasman.
Welcome to Target Market Insights. I'm your man, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great show. Now, if you're enjoying this show, do me one quick favor. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode, and also leave us a 5-star rating and review. All right, that's going to help more people find the show and get some of the great value that you're getting as well. Now, today, we're going to be bringing on Erik J. Olson. Erik J. Olson is the founder and CEO of Array Digital. That's a digital marketing agency based in Virginia. He's the host of the Journey to $100 Million, a daily podcast and Amazon Flash briefing, as well as the host of Marketers Anonymous, a monthly marketing meetup. Now, Erik speaks often on the topics of entrepreneurialism, building freelance businesses, and digital marketing. You can find Erik online at IamErikJOlson.com. Let's welcome to the show, Erik J. Olson.
Hey, John. How you doing?
I am doing great. It's a beautiful morning, and I'm happy to talk to you today. Erik, we went over a lot in your bio, but why don't you take a minute and give us a little bit more context of how you describe yourself in your own words?
Sure. So, as the intro said, I run a digital marketing agency in Virginia. We have been Array Digital for the last 3 years, but before that, I ran 2 other companies that I had started myself. And so, recently what I realized is that building a company from scratch and getting it up to a sustainable, viable amount of revenue is actually quite a difficult journey. So I talk to a lot of new entrepreneurs, people that want to do this, and I try to give them advice because I know that there's a much better way of doing it now that I've gone through the 10 years of headaches and issues that I've caused for myself. And so I often try to get people up to that level just in half the time that it took me.
Yeah, Erik, well, thanks for sharing that information with the folks you're helping. And I'm sure our listeners would love to get a little bit of some of that advice and some of that context for them in their own business as well. So let's start with the digital marketing agency, right? So you said that you've had it for a couple of years, but you've been running a digital marketing agency for almost a decade now. How did you get into the digital marketing space to begin with?
Sure. So actually, I haven't been running a digital marketing agency for 10 years. It's only been for the last about 2 years since we went all in on digital marketing. So my background starting in about 1999 was custom software development. And I was an employee at lots of different companies where I was a coder. I did .NET, and then I eventually moved over to JavaScript. And I was building really like data intensive applications and then later on mobile applications. So that was really my focus, is that I produced a digital product that we gave to a client. Well, 3 years ago, I met my now co-founder, and he was building websites, in particular marketing websites. And we were both kind of tinkering with something in digital marketing as a way of making money after we produced the product. So for him, it was SEO. For me, it was a little bit of social media. And when we met each other, we did a couple of projects together, and we realized that there really wasn't much overlap in what we did, and each of us could benefit by having the other's services in our company. After about a year, we decided to merge. And at that time, we hired a digital marketing manager. So the idea was we were going to build software and mobile apps, and then we would have an add-on product, which would be digital marketing. So we hired this fellow, and for about, 3 to 6 months after he came on, I started to really kind of ask, like, what is this guy doing? And I know we're making money, but is this actually adding value? And so I did a super deep dive into digital marketing, like all things digital marketing. Anything I can get my hands on, I read nonstop: books, articles, magazines, Ad Age, Ad Week. I listened to podcasts. I watched videos. I looked over his shoulder. I got involved. I talked the talk, and I walked the walk for a solid year. And during that year, we started to actually transition more into digital marketing than the actual custom software development. And about a year into that, which was 2 years ago, we realized that this is actually where we want to be in digital marketing. So even though custom software development was producing more profits, they were project-based profits. And that made it very, very difficult for us for a number of reasons. One is we had no idea where our next project was going to come from. So from a business standpoint, it was not ideal whatsoever. As a matter of fact, one time our CPA asked us, "Hey, Erik and Kevin, what's next quarter looking like?" And our answer was, we have no idea. We could double in size or we could be out of business, because we just didn't really have a good grasp on who our clients were, where they were coming from, and even why they were coming to us, because it just varied so drastically for every single project. Well, with digital marketing, that wasn't the case. With digital marketing, it was the same typical client and they had the same typical need. And I'm saying it like it's boring, but boring sometimes is good. It's predictable. And so once we started to focus more and more on digital marketing and did the total cut over to 100% digital marketing, all of a sudden we could start projecting things like our expenses and our revenue out many, many months, frankly, years if we wanted to. And we could start thinking about the future, not just our present.
So you mentioned that,
Are you recording? Okay, you're recording. All right.
Yeah, I'm recording. All right. So Erik, that's interesting that you went from a business that you felt was more profitable in what you were doing right there with the kind of creating the projects and the services, but you felt digital marketing was the better play because it was a bit more, it sounds like it was more predictable than the project-based business. And because of it, uh, I'll say repetitive, but the reality is that you guys could actually create systems and processes to expedite what the solutions are, as opposed to taking a new project, really starting from scratch every time based on what the ask is and having to use kind of your mental and your partner's brains to figure out what the right solution is.
Yeah.
Walk me through a little bit, like what sparked the interest, because you said that you brought on this guy and they were the digital marketing person and you started trying to figure out what they were actually doing. What sparked that curiosity that ultimately led to this major pivot?
So you're right as far as boring versus creativity, and the two different models are, you can be creative in the services that you offer as far as like always doing something different, and that's what we found in custom software, is that with every single project there was always some new integration that we had to integrate with the system, and we didn't know anything about it, and so there was this big mystery. So we were creative with our offering, but what I really wanted is the offering to get frankly kind of boring. Like, we're going to always offer social media management as an example, and it's going to be, we're going to post 3 times a week and we're going to answer comments. It's boring from that regard, but then the creativity is in the actual execution. And so there's a difference there. I wanted boring as far as services, very predictable, same price list and same list of services over and over and over again, so you can get good. But then the creativity is in the product that you produce every single time. As far as the spark, well, I personally started to get very, very interested in digital marketing. Like I said before, when I didn't understand what he was doing. I was frankly a coder. Now, I have a deep business background. I have an MBA, and I've been running businesses up to that point for about 8 years. But I really needed to prove to myself that we were collecting money already from some clients that we had sold this to, and I needed to really prove to myself that I wasn't ripping people off. And I just didn't know. I just didn't understand enough. And that's why I personally did that deep dive. Now, with me doing the deep dive and me being the CEO and the co-founder, kind of the company came along for the ride. And once I was convinced that digital marketing was the way to go, I started to dig deeper and deeper into the numbers. And in particular, over the holidays of 2017, right between Christmas and New Year's, when everything in the business world just completely dies down for a week, I had some spare time. And I was looking at our year, 2017, and I had broken it up into a couple of different revenue sources. So there was building of websites, there was supporting websites, there was custom software development, and there was digital marketing. The first 3, building websites, supporting websites. Well, supporting websites was recurring revenue, but it was kind of hit or miss at the time. And mobile apps and custom applications, custom software. those three were basically project-based. Digital marketing was this recurring thing. And so I looked at our revenue and I looked at our expenses for each of those four categories. And at that moment, going into 2018, only one of those revenue sources was predicted. If nothing else changed at that moment, I was predicting for 2007 or 18, we would be cash flow positive because we had contracts in place where clients were paying us on a monthly basis. And I had very low expenses, just one person at the time. And I thought, well, that's awesome because all these other ones, especially software, like I also have to sell, I also have to identify, prospect, sell, deliver, and collect about $700,000 of custom software just to break even in that one category. And I had not that many leads going into 2018, and it was just daunting. And so I was like, okay, well, that sucks. That's our most profitable area, and I don't have a lot of leads right now. I got a lot of work to do. And I've also been doing this year after year after year. But digital marketing, small dollars, but big profit margin at that time. And I thought, well, if I could just grow the dollars there, then I could have a much better and predictable business. And so that's exactly what we did. After that analysis, Kevin Daisy is my co-founder, we had a couple discussions around it, and we were already tinkering with the idea of going 100% digital marketing. But that was the final straw on the camel's back. We decided, okay, we're going to go 100% digital marketing starting in 2018, which is exactly what we did.
No, that sounds amazing. And to your point, understanding the predictable nature of your revenue streams is such a critical component. As we were talking before we hit the record button, prior to going full time in multifamily investing, I was at a marketing agency, and I was one of the, group directors, and part of my role was really more on the ops side, right? More operations. So really looking at our staffing, understanding the contracts that we had in place with the different clients, the different vendors, the terms of payments, all of that kind of stuff. So I really didn't even do as much marketing at that point, as much as I was really running the business or running my portion of the business. And to your point, the big thing for us was always about getting our clients on retainers so we could predict the revenue. That project based, you get an assignment, you do an event, you do a concert series, whatever. That's great, but that's a big pop. And then the other thing, to your point, is we had to be prepared for those projects. We had to keep staff. We had to retain our top talent to be ready for when those opportunities came. But sometimes they would get delayed, or sometimes it would take longer. Or you might hit a stretch where, you didn't have a project for a few months. So, it was always hard to run those very efficiently, versus the revenue-based projects where you're on retainers. They were profitable, they were easy to predict, and you could also be more efficient with your manpower because you knew what you had in the bank for those things. So you could be more efficient with your time, with your hours. You could kind of borrow some time there. So anyone who's running an agency or anyone who's in this space, you kind of understand the importance and the value of having retainer-based clients or clients that are paying you consistently every month versus having to hunt, right? And going out there and finding that next deal. And to your point, I think the big thing there is when you don't know where your revenue is going to come from, you're spending a lot of your time trying to identify those leads and then converting those leads into being clients. Talk to me a little bit about that, because that is really the biggest part for any entrepreneur, is going out and finding new business. What are some of the things that you've employed that allowed you to be successful in finding new clients and finding new business?
So our clients are mostly B2C. So their customers are individual consumers like me and you as individuals, as people and families and whatnot, not necessarily as businesses. Right? So there's B2C, which is what we focused on for our clients. But then we ourselves are B2B because we're trying to get other businesses to sign with us. So we're kind of in like this nexus between these two worlds. We do B2B for ourselves, but when we get a client, we do B2C for them, usually. So there's a couple different ways that you can answer that question, and it depends on whether you focus on B2C or B2B. So I'll answer first in B2C terms, because that's what we do for our clients. With B2C, what's really nice about that is you're going after individuals. And a lot of times you can get to those individuals through demographics. And demographics are available through systems like Facebook advertising. And so I could say, I want my ad to reach only women between 25 and 45. And that can be delivered extremely efficiently through a system like Facebook or Instagram. But it can't be delivered very efficiently through a system like broadcast TV, broadcast radio, printed newspaper, because it goes to everybody. So when you're talking about broadcast, really the play is you need your cost per impression to be really, really low, because a lot of those impressions are throwaway. So let's say, as an example, someone in the multifamily industry, they need to target people that are renters, not homeowners. Right? If you're advertising to a homeowner to rent your place, you're wasting your money. Well, in my region, which is the Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Virginia area, it's about 50% renters and 50% homeowners. I'm sure it varies slightly throughout the country, but it's probably pretty close. So if you were going to advertise for to lease your unit, then you're going to have to, half of the people you reach are going to be totally throwaways because they're homeowners. So that means that whatever price you pay to reach, say, 1,000 people, which is referred in advertising as your CPM, cost per 1,000, whatever that price is, just automatically double it. Because if the reality is you're paying twice as much to get to your target audience, at least just the basic demographic of non-homeowners, people that are renting. But then if you want to get to, say, women, well, double it again, because you're going to be reaching men that are renters. If this is just your strategy, you want to get to, say, non-homeowners that are women of a certain age. And then the people that are above and below that age that you're trying to get to, double or triple, just depending on what the math works out to be. So you have to really take that into account. In order to reach the people that you want to reach, you're going to have to increase that cost for broadcast. But when you compare that to your cost in Facebook, as an example, that's the adjustment that needs to be made. And a lot of times people don't really make that adjustment, and well, it could cost them, because you really have to double, triple, quadruple your cost in broadcast in order to compare it to something that's super highly targeted, like a Facebook ad.
And digital marketing is way more accessible for most people too, right? Because trying to get a TV spot can be pretty costly. And to the points you just laid out, when you look at that CPM, that cost per 1,000 impressions, that can really hurt people, because if you have a product that is really segmented or very specific who the audience is, then you may be reaching a lot of people who aren't really in your demographic. Now, if you converse that with digital marketing, where you actually have the ability to be more laser focused on who exactly you're connecting with, you have a chance to really get tight on that. So from a digital standpoint, as you look to grow and connect, you mentioned Facebook advertising and Instagram. Are there other platforms or other things you do to get kind of really specific with who you're reaching and who that audience is and where you get them?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So right now, the two main players when it comes to advertising are Google and Facebook. And Facebook owns Instagram and it owns WhatsApp as well. There's no advertising right now in WhatsApp, but they keep suggesting it, and they keep getting pushback. But probably one day there will be advertising in WhatsApp. So Google is really, really good for intent-based advertising, which means that if I have the intent to buy these earbuds right here, right? I need earbuds. I'm going to go into Google and I'm going to say wireless Bluetooth earbuds. Like right at that moment, I need those earbuds. And so if I was advertising to sell these earbuds, then I can have an ad show up immediately. So Google is super good for intent-based advertising. Now, you can continue to leverage that intent in other places. So Google owns YouTube. Google has a mechanism where you can show a YouTube video ad to someone who has that intent as well. Right? So if someone has searched for wireless earbuds, Bluetooth earbuds, music during jogging, there's a whole bunch of different terms you can probably come up with. You can tell YouTube via Google. Anyone who searched for this in Google in the past, show them my video ad on YouTube. So it's not quite as good as the intent-based system that Google has, because it's not immediate. But what could happen is someone could search for wireless Bluetooth earbuds, and then tomorrow they go into YouTube and they are doing some research on how to hang a light. And up pops this article, this video by someone like me saying, "Hey, are you looking for Bluetooth earbuds? Have I got a deal for you?" Right? So they're not looking for Bluetooth earbuds at that moment, but they were a couple hours ago, a couple weeks ago, a couple days ago. So that's a really good way of doing advertising. So intent-based advertising. Search is best for that. In YouTube, it could also be based on guessing based on what they're watching. Right? So if I'm watching a video on how to hang a light, there's a probability that I need to buy a light first, right? Or I need to buy an electrical kit. And so you can create ads, video ads, and target people based on what they're likely in need of based on what they're watching. In Facebook, it's similar to that. You can target people extremely well based on personal, physical demographics. Right? So I'm a man. I'm 47 years old. I live in Chesapeake, Virginia. I work in Chesapeake, Virginia. Whatever information I gave to Facebook, you could zero in on someone like me or exclude me, just depending on what you're going for. So very, very good for like personal, physical kinds of demographics. And then you also have access to what's called psychographics, which is how people behave. So you could say, I'm interested in people, I want to reach people who are training for a triathlon or really just interested in triathlons, which would be me right now. I want to finish a half Ironman in June, hoping it's not canceled. So how would they know that? Well, because I've joined a couple of Facebook groups that have to do with triathlons. So there's a really, really good chance that I'm into triathlons. So you could target people based on things like that as well.
Yeah, so and that ability to target, I mean, really makes Facebook very appealing. And that's one of the reasons they've been able to grow and just really be dominant as a player in the space, because they have so much information from so many users and they know everything we're looking to do, right? They know all the, the passions that we have, and being able to tap into that as a marketer gives you a lot of flexibility on how you target, especially when you factor in some of those behavioral things. Because if we know that you are a runner, let's just say you're Nike or Asics or someone, you know, if I know that you're into triathlon, I can serve you a very specific message for a running shoe, as opposed to just shoes, right? Or as opposed to just basketball shoes. But I can serve up something very specific that's tailored towards you. And it doesn't just have to be, you know, a promotional piece. It could be something that is maybe more content driven, where it's more educational. And maybe there's some content, some ways you can add value there. How much does content marketing kind of play into your business plan for yourself and for your clients, as opposed to just paid advertising?
Yeah, so paid advertising revenue-wise is the biggest service, but as far as the fees that we get from that, it's about it's probably about 25 to 30% of our actual you know, gross profit. So the cost of doing goods, cost of goods sold for advertising is very, very high because a lot of that money is just passed through over to places like Google and Facebook. Content marketing is really good. We're big, strong believers in SEO, content optimization, and copywriting. So when it comes to content marketing, the basis is clearly content, and a lot of times it's the written word. Now, video is fantastic, but the written word is really still the basis for things like Google's algorithm. The bulk of SEO value, and when I say that, I really mean Google, because about 90% of Google search or of search results are through Google. So you really have to play by Google's rules. But a big proportion of that comes from the written word that's on your website. With content marketing, it's really all about the articles that you produce on a regular basis. So what Google is looking for from a website, which is what SEO comes from, is a website that is alive and updated on a regular basis. The more, the better. So think like a media website, say your local newspaper. They are putting out articles every potentially 15, 10 minutes. Who knows, right? So like very, very fast. It's alive. It's maintained. The closer you can get to that, the better. The reality is most companies can't afford to have a full staff writing all day about whatever's happening in their industry. So you have to come up with some sort of a compromise. For most of our businesses, most of the time, that compromise is 2 articles per month. That's really just kind of like the nice balance we think between what they can afford and what they need to do as far as identifying articles and writing articles that are pertinent to their industry and can get some SEO juice out of them. But if they could do 4 or 10 articles, then great. It's just most people can't afford that, at least with the clients that we write for. So writing articles that are very, very specific to your industry and also super specific individually on different keywords that people are very likely to search for in Google. So instead of just writing about whatever you think is interesting, write about something where people are actually searching for that term in Google. So the idea is they go into Google, they search for something, and up pops your article. And they'll click on that link, and now they're on your website. Once they're on your website, you've got lots of different options. You can have the phone number in the header. You can have a button halfway down the article that says, interested in more content like this? Here's a couple of other articles. Or want to hire us? Click this button, contact us. You can also do things like, which we haven't talked about yet, retarget them. So with retargeting, there's a lot of different systems that offer advertising and retargeting. And what that really means is you want to show an ad to someone who's been to your website when they go into whatever other system you run ads for. So you can do retargeting in places like Facebook. Facebook will give you a little bit of code, you copy it, you paste it into your website, and then when someone goes to your website, Facebook knows it. When they go back into Facebook, which they're going to do eventually, you can advertise to them directly. That's called retargeting.
Love it, man.
You want to get them to your website, which means you need SEO value, right? And then, but it also takes time. So SEO is a long-term play. It's not like you're going to write an article and bam, you're going to get 5 times the traffic overnight. It's going to take 5 months to get more traffic. So SEO is more of a long-term play, but it builds up over time. Advertising is pay to play. You stop paying, you're not playing in advertising anymore.
Yeah, it was really 3 great points there. One, just going backwards on the paid side, you pay, you can get the traffic, you get in front of the eyeballs. On the content piece, the SEO is an important driver. And like you said, it's not as easy as I think many of us would like it to be. It's not like you write an article filled with the keywords or about the keywords that you want to target, and then boom, you're on front page of Google. It doesn't really happen that way unless you come up with something that's really compelling that actually addresses the questions that a reader has better than some of the content that's already out there. So it's really hard to do that, especially if you're not updating your website every day or, constantly. But nonetheless, it's still important to start having a presence because it can help to drive traffic to your website. And then I think the third point about retargeting is so smart and spot on, because by retargeting, you actually have the ability to reach out to people who've already been to your website. And if you think about that, maybe they signed up, maybe they took the next step in whatever it is that you were serving, but maybe they didn't. Most people don't, right? Most people go to a website, you look around for a little bit, and then you go off to the next site. So if you can retarget them and figure out, hey, did you find what you were looking for? Or maybe I have something else that you could look into. That's a great way to re-engage with people as well. So just some really good points there about understanding how the digital marketing landscape lays out with paid advertising, how to really look at, search engine optimization and kind of creating content that allows your page to jump towards the top, as well as finally being able to retarget people who already come to your website and who have expressed an interest in learning more about what you have to offer.
Yeah, retargeting is something that we recommend almost all the time because first of all, it's really not that expensive because you're only advertising to the people that have gone to your website. And unless you run just a massive website, you're only talking about maybe a couple hundred to a couple thousand people on a weekly basis. So the amount of people that you can reach is relatively small. So it doesn't cost an arm and a leg, but it's also people that have already expressed some level of interest in what you offer because they went to your website. Now, it's very likely that, well, we don't know why they went to your website in a lot of cases, right? Unless you really, really dig in. They could have gone to your website because they are actually interested and then they got distracted. Something happened and poof, they're out, right? They may have gone because, or they may have gone there and not liked your offering. We don't really know. We just know that they've been to your website. You invested through things like SEO, the website cost itself. Maybe if they came through an actual primary ad, that's how they got there, through your social media. You invested already to get them there. So it's a very low cost and very reasonably priced to get back in front of them again. So it's almost like a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about some of the other things you're working on right now. So you recently had your State of Digital Marketing address. And I know there we talk all the, about the things that are happening in the digital marketing landscape. What were some of the big kind of takeaways from that event?
So the reason we did that is because, well, first of all, we wanted to stand out amongst our competitors. So, and this is kind of a lesson learned, I think, for the people that are watching this and listening right now, is we're always trying to do something that differentiates us from everyone else who does the same thing that we do. And I can look at every single competitor and I can tell you why we're better or why we do something a little bit different or better. But the reality is that people that aren't in the industry and aren't willing to do all that research, they just don't know. They think that I'm just like some other digital marketing agency down the street. And I think that we all have that perception of businesses that we're just not really that familiar with. Pick any business, like dollar stores, right? Is Dollar Tree really better than Dollar Family, better than your corner dollar? I don't know. I just know that they sell for $1 or close to it. And it is what it is, right? So I think like trying to differentiate how you're better is very difficult in my opinion, but you can show that you're better by doing things that your competitors are not. So like as an example, our competitors are not hosting monthly marketing meetups. We are. Our competitors are not going live on Facebook every Friday at noon Eastern. We are. Which, by the way, if you're interested, that's at thisisarray.live every Friday at noon. Well, there was nothing that was like some sort of a bigger event in our region that talked about digital marketing. The biggest thing was what we were already doing, which was a monthly meetup that drew about 50 marketers and business owners, but we wanted to do a bigger event. And so we came up with the idea of the State of Digital Marketing Address, which would be an annual address that would be held in the beginning of the year. We had originally picked February 20th, and then we got a threat of snow. And so we're like, okay. So we had to shut down because if anyone even talks about snow around here, the whole region just stops. So we rescheduled for about 3 weeks later, which was March 12th. And that was going to be awesome. And then everyone started to talk about coronavirus, actually. So it's interesting because we sold 200 tickets, about 120 people actually showed. But so it was a good turnout. The room was still packed. But even just the talk of something like coronavirus had an effect on us, which we didn't quite anticipate because it didn't really hit hard until about 3 or 4 days later on Monday, which was like the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, I guess. Monday the 16th, I think is what it is. But at the event, what I really wanted to talk about was differentiating what works now for most businesses most of the time. And that's a phrase you've heard me say a couple times now. For most businesses, most of the time. There's always going to be outliers. But what is working right now? Not what could work in a year or in 10 years or what's the newest, hottest thing. What works now? So let's talk about like social media in particular. Social media has a lot of rapid change. So have you heard of TikTok?
Yes.
Yes, right? That's the new hotness. Everyone is flocking to it. As a matter of fact, I've noticed probably about 2, maybe 3 months ago, some of the really big influencers from Instagram started to not only have a profile on TikTok, because they had that for a while, but they weren't doing anything. They started to produce content specifically for TikTok. So the big influencers are moving over there right now, or at least they're there. I don't know about moving, but they're there. And that was like a pivotal moment for me when I was thinking about TikTok is, oh, wow, everyone's going over there. This thing is the thing.
And Erik, many of our listeners may have heard of TikTok, but they may not actually know what it is. So could you maybe just summarize what TikTok is for those who are like, no, I haven't heard of TikTok?
Sure. So TikTok is TikTok. TikTok. It's a mobile app, and you shoot a video on your phone, and it's typically paired with music. And so it started off as kind of like a lip syncing, just kind of like fun video music that you would create yourself. And then it's kind of morphed a little bit into somewhat of a comical platform, where a lot of the videos that you see are just people just goofing around. And then it's continuing to morph and age up, which means that the people that are on there are starting to become a little bit older, which is very expected with social media. It usually starts at a young demographic, and then older folks, parents and grandparents get on there, and all of a sudden everybody's on there. So it's starting to age up. And with that, there's even educational content that's on there. So that's what TikTok is. TikTok is a great platform. You may think that going on to Facebook is wasting time, but you can waste a lot of time on TikTok. And frankly, it's just fun. It's lighthearted. No one takes themselves seriously at all. Whereas on Instagram, to contrast that, it's super serious. Like, it has to be the perfect caption and the perfect picture with the perfect lighting at the golden hour and the perfect filter. And it's I don't know. For me, I don't like it because there's so much pressure to post the perfect post on Instagram, whereas on TikTok, it's just fun. Right? So there's a big contrast in TikTok versus something like Instagram. But what's best for business? Now, if you are targeting teens, young teens, TikTok is great for you. But most businesses aren't, especially most businesses that I deal with at least aren't. Most businesses are still targeting your traditional kind of targeting audience, which is usually people between about 25 and 45. That's where people are spending most of their money during the course of their lifetime. Home ownership is typically higher around that age range. And so that's really where most businesses are trying to get to. And again, maybe this is just me, but or our area, but a lot of service-based, home-based businesses, financial advisors, folks like that, retailers are trying to get to that demographic. TikTok is not the place for them. So even though I just spent 5 minutes talking about how fun and cool it is and how I prefer to go to TikTok, the reality is a lot more people will spend a lot more time in Facebook. So, we were talking before about like exciting versus creative or boring. Look, Facebook's been around, I don't even know how long now. I mean, what, 15 years? When it comes to social media, it's boring, right? Facebook, boring. But everybody is there. People spend 3 hours a day in social media, and the majority of that time is in Facebook. And they check in, like 75% of the people that use Facebook check in every single day. Every single day, 75% of Facebook users are checking in once a day, and about 92% once a week. So people are in there, and they're spending a lot of time. And so as a business, that's where you want to be. So yeah, TikTok's cool. TikTok's fun. Instagram is cool and fun. There's another one now called Byte. Have you heard of Byte? Byte app. It's like a 6-second looping video. And so Vine died, and now Byte has replaced it. That's kind of hot these days. So yeah, there's a lot of hotness out there in social media. But the reality is, if you're a business, you want to play in Facebook. That's just the reality.
So Erik, let me ask the question. I think many people may have, many business owners. Let's say you're starting out right now. So you have your personal Facebook profile. You don't have one for your business. Starting out, I mean, Facebook feels like it's crowded, right? And there's a lot of noise there. So would they be better served going to one of these newer platforms and maybe being one of the earlier pioneers on these platforms and growing that way versus going into a place like Facebook where it's kind of already saturated?
Yeah. I think for advertising, Facebook makes a lot of sense for most businesses. And that's advertising as a business. Well, I take it back. Or as a personal brand. For some, the answer I think is it depends. And one of the things that it really depends on is, as the founder, are you willing to get in front of the camera? Are you willing to get behind the microphone? Are you willing to lend your name and yourself to the business for the betterment of the business, right? So as an example, this podcast, right? Array Digital, my company, can't be on this podcast, but Erik Olson, the co-founder and CEO, can. So I am willing to put my name and my face and my voice out there. And I know that if people are at all interested in what I have to say, they're going to be interested in what Array Digital offers. So if you're willing to do that, then I think as a person, you should create a personal brand. And then really the question is, where will your personal brand resonate best? It may not be Facebook, right? So as an example for me right now is Twitter. Twitter is not the darling of social media like it used to be. It's actually kind of on the downslope, but there's a lot of people on Twitter. And this is how you and I met, right? We met through Twitter. So Twitter works very well for me. The next best is probably LinkedIn because of the business experience and interest that I have. Facebook and Instagram, not so much for me. I haven't put a lot of time and effort into it, but Twitter, number one, LinkedIn, number two. That's where I get a lot of, the bulk of like the attention on me. And then that gets siphoned right into the business. Now, if I didn't have a business, I probably wouldn't do any of this. Honestly, I would just, especially now with coronavirus, I'd go buy the 100-acre farm and I would never see the outside world and you'd never hear from me. And I'd be thinking about planting something right now and a lot of it. But that's not me right now, right? So for me, it's super important for me to get out into the public eye. My co-founder, Kevin Daisy, is the same way. He's doing podcasts. He's on LinkedIn a lot. LinkedIn is for him, for the most part. That's where he puts a lot of his attention. So if you're willing to be the face of your company, which I strongly recommend you do, then find the social media platform that, frankly, you just feel the most comfortable with that actually has some business impact as well. If you're not willing to be the face, then you're probably really talking about the advertising techniques that we talked about before, Facebook ads and Google ads.
Yeah, and Erik, you mentioned just how important it is to get yourself out there. And I think part of it is there's a lot of resources that are available, right? So Twitter, Instagram, the podcast, those are things that you can do where the advertising of it doesn't cost you any money. Versus if you really want to push your brand out there, you've got to find other ways to get in front or spend some money around doing that. Speaking of podcasts, you've got your show, The Journey to $100 Million. Real quick, what is the podcast really about, and what can listeners expect when they tune into an episode?
So about 2 years ago, we were at a day-long training session on how to grow your business. I'm part of a group called the Entrepreneurs Organization, also referred to as EO. And once a quarter, they have day-long training, and they fly a speaker in, and they talk about several different topics like cash flow and execution and people, people that work for you and whatnot. So we were at one of those sessions, and the facilitator asked if there's just one thing that you could accomplish in the rest of your career, just one big goal, what would it be? And so we broke up into little groups, and me and Kevin broke up by ourselves. And actually Jake, who's our creative director, he was there as well. And we were trying to quantify like how big we want to grow. And we're like, well, it'd be nice to one day have X number of offices. And it was totally random, 5, 50, who knows? There's lots of different strategies about things like physical offices. And then we were like, well, that's hard. So let's talk about people. How many people do we want? But that also is very strategically driven. It's actually better to have fewer people per dollar of revenue coming in than more. So that wasn't a real good way. And then at one point I just said, guys, honestly, like I'm just not going to be happy until we have $100 million company, which is ridiculous. At the time, we were like just barely over $1 million a year. So it's one of those like just huge, ridiculous goals, the big, hairy, audacious goals. Before the show, you and I briefly talked about like Grant Cardone. He's always like 10xing and like set your goal way higher than you think is even achievable. A lot of people talk about that, setting a really high bar for yourself. And I'm like, okay, screw it, I'll do it. Let's try this. Let's try to set a really high bar, $100 million. And so for a couple of weeks we talked about that, and I'm like, look, guys, I really want to do this. And all of a sudden we started talking in terms of what it's like to be a $100 million company, or this process that we have is never going to get us to where we want to go. And our employees knew about it and our clients knew about it. And so when it was time to create a podcast, we created it around the concept of growing the business. So it's a daily podcast, and we alternate between me and Kevin, and we also have guest hosts on, which, John, I'd love you to be a guest host, by the way.
I love that.
Yeah. So these are daily 4 to 5 minute long episodes. In most episodes, they start off with a story of where, frankly, I screwed something up. And it happens enough where I could be on hourly, so we're always constantly trying something different and screwing something up. And, it sucks to screw something up, but there's a benefit. And the benefit is there's a lesson learned, right? It's called learning from experience. And unfortunately, you only learn from experience if you actually go through that experience yourself, or someone conveys that experience to you. And there's a lot of different ways that you can get that experience: through podcasts, right? You can get it through reading. You can get it through magazines. You get it through history. So the best way of learning, hands down, by far, is to go through it yourself, but it takes time. The second best way is to learn from others. And so for us, the concept is experience share. Today I did this. It didn't really work out the way that I wanted to. So I tried this other technique and that worked. And so I recommend you do that technique, right? And so that's the format usually, which is some lesson learned and then how people can benefit from that. And the whole point is, as we grow, we're going to come across different obstacles, different barriers, different issues, and we're going to be able to teach people like how we got past those one obstacle at a time. And hopefully they can listen and they can get past those obstacles way faster than without listening.
Love it, Eric. So we'll definitely make sure we link to that Journey to $100 Million podcast. Definitely worth checking out. And to your point, I mean, if you can learn from other people's mistakes as well as just their advice, what they've gone through, way better, and will certainly cut down the time from you trying to figure it out all by yourself. So we've run a little bit long here with the show, a little longer than most of our episodes, but I do want to move on to our Bullseye Round. You ready?
Okay.
Give me the book you've gifted or recommended the most in the last year.
By far, okay, actually, there's 2 books, and it spans over like 2 years. Going back about 2 years, it was Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. So Profit First is how you can structure your bank accounts so that they work in a system that you are familiar with, which is basically log in and see how much money you have, versus what the business actually needs, and making sure that you have profit first and then you spend your expenses. Basically, pay yourself first. The second book is a more recent one, which is I Will Teach You How to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. And that one is similar. It's a financial book, but it's about your personal finances and how you set up systems so that money goes to where it needs to go and you stop wasting money. So 2 financial books, and they're fantastic books. I recommend them. Certainly Profit First to anyone that is a business owner, and I Will Teach You to Be Rich to anyone.
All right, give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
For my business, well, I would say for your listeners, I'll check, of course, Journey to $100 Million, the podcast, and it's at journeyto100million.com. I think that's a really good resource for a lot of people. Other marketing podcasts and resources, There's a marketing school with Neil Patel and Eriks. That is also a daily podcast and flash briefing. I listen to that most mornings. I really like social media, and I really like podcasts because it's free education, and it's delivered to you. So a couple of people that I follow that I think are really sharp, Grant Cardone, we mentioned before. I think he's really sharp as far as a business person, a salesman, and also a marketer. He's very savvy when it comes to marketing. And Gary Vaynerchuk, also known as Gary V. I was really, really into him for a long time. I got his sneakers. I really like everything that he says. Certainly from a marketing perspective, I agree with 100% of what he says. He goes into some other things about mindset and whatnot where, maybe for me it's a little touchy-feely, but that's a sharp dude. And basically anything that he says is you can take to the bank.
Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
So one thing that I started last year was taking New Year's resolutions seriously. So I was, holidays of 2018, I was in Florida visiting my parents, and I couldn't make it to the gym to do my normal weights routine. And so I was running on the treadmill, and I ran like 2 or 3 days in a row at 3 miles each time. And I was like, I wonder how long or how far I could go in a year. I did the math, and it was a little bit over 1,000 miles. And so I set a New Year's resolution to run 1,000 miles in 2019. And that turned into a daily habit. I also set a couple of other New Year's resolutions, but taking the running in isolation, in order to pull that off, I couldn't just run whenever I wanted to. I had to actually come up with a plan. And so I created a spreadsheet where I knew I had to run on average about 2 3/4 miles, or call it 3 miles a day. But I needed to then track exactly how far I went, because I wanted to know for sure I went 1,000 miles, not just close to it. So I had to come up with a tracking mechanism. And then I also came up with an accountability mechanism. So every single Monday I report out, and I still do, how I'm working towards my New Year's resolutions. So a lot of people, when it comes to New Year's resolutions, they literally lie to themselves. So if you ask someone what their New Year's resolution is a month before or after the New Year, a lot of times they'll kind of almost chuckle and be like, I want to lose weight. And it's something super vague. They don't even mean it. They just say it because it's the thing to say. And they're lying to themselves. And I think it's a shame, because it's an opportunity for us to just kind of like reset everything that we're doing and focus in into very specific goals. So for me right now, I want to kick ass at a half Ironman. So not just finish it. That's not the goal. The goal is to finish it to the best of my abilities. Now, I don't expect myself to become an elite athlete, but I expect myself to really try. And so I have a training plan that I'm following. So every morning when the pools are open again, I'll go swimming, I'll go biking, I'll go running. I'm going to stick to that training plan. Well, the only thing that's going to stop me is if the actual pool closes and I can't swim outside right now. So, I'm going to do everything in my power. And it's usually in the morning to get that done before I go to work and get distracted by the rest of life. So as far as, I think the question was daily rituals, to summarize all that, set a goal for yourself, pay yourself first. Just like with the 2 book recommendations, Profit First and I Will Teach You to Be Rich, pay yourself first. Get what you want to get done first, and then let other people bombard you with their requests.
Love it. Very strong. Great advice right there. What are you curious about right now?
So I'm curious. Okay, so we're in the middle of the coronavirus. This is week number 2 for the United States. And I'm curious how this social distancing and social media are going to affect personal interactions in the future. So I think things like shaking hands will probably, like right now it's a no, right? But I think it'll probably come back a little bit, but it may be seen as something like taboo, right? And I think things like maybe even in-person meetings, I think people are going to be fearful because, it's not just coronavirus, right? If it's not the coronavirus, it's the swine flu. If it's not that, it's the avian flu. If it's not either one of those, then it's just the flu, which people don't take seriously, which is crazy because that's the biggest killer of them all. There's Ebola. There's a lot of dangers out there, right? When it comes to like interacting with people, and so I'm concerned, or I'm curious, like how all of this with the social distancing and this becoming the norm. Me working from home when I don't normally work from home will become much more normalized to the world. And then you have things like social media, which is all about social distancing. Is actually getting together in person going to be something that's either taboo or not desired? Quick story. My daughter, when she was a junior, went to some ring dance or some dance. I forget which one it was, but she was only there for like 45 minutes, and she had put a lot of effort into like the dress and the makeup and all that stuff. And she went with her friends, but she said it was boring. And the rest of the night, guess what she did? She was on Instagram. And at first I thought, oh, that's kind of sad. Of like kids these days, what's wrong with them? But I realized that, for her, like that's more fun being on the phone than being in an awkward, personal, face-to-face conversation. So like over time, how far are we going to take that as a society? That's one of the things I think about right now.
No, that's a great curiosity. Outside of coronavirus, I think the bigger thing to your point is how will this continue to move things forward? I'll look at it on the other side from a business standpoint. If you're a business owner and you're paying for you're leasing out a physical space, you're paying for, all your merchandise, everything that is entailed with running a business. Well, if you had an e-business or an online business, or to your point, I'm an event organizer as well. So you were able to get your event off. Right now, my event's in limbo, so I'm not sure if our event's going to happen May 16th and 17th or not. More than likely, it will be delayed. But to your point, those people who are running virtual events, not worried about it right now, and it's very profitable to do a virtual event versus a physical event. So there are a lot of different changes that I think both, individuals as well as business owners are going to think about as it comes to how we interact going forward. So great points there. Hey, this has been really good, Erik. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about your business, the way you've created Array Digital, and just really your approach to building out the business, profiting first, and just the way you've stayed diligent with your goals and what you want to commit to in building things out, and all the advice you've given to our listeners. I mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but for those who want to learn more about you or get in touch with Array Digital, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Sure. I hang out the most on Twitter, and my handle is I am Erik J. Olson. Erik is ERIK, and Olson is OLSON. If you DM me, I'll respond for sure.
Excellent. Erik, well, thank you again for coming on Target Market Insights. Hope you have a great day, okay?
Now, it's a lot of fun. I appreciate it, John.